going to remember some highlights from games. They're going to remember the national championships they won. But I think the things that stick out the most for them and that they'll remember the most are the memories they made with their teammates.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Reflective Coach podcast with Coach Luca. I'm delighted to welcome American coach Kate Hultin into this episode. It was great to speak to Kate about her insights, her perspective, and the American system compared to the UK system. It's great to get this further understanding and ways that the American system works with players and really connecting with them. It was great to understand college systems, high school systems and club football which is available to players and how this goes about in terms of their educational program which is really out there. I enjoyed speaking to Kate because there was so much to take away and I really gained such a fascinating insight. We also then spoke about some tactical concepts as the conversation really went on and evolved, and it was great to really have these insights which was really helpful. But when we got down to it, we were having conversations. It's about having these truth tellers, someone that these players can really go to and connect with, because they don't always want to speak to an adult and they don't always feel that they can have these open conversations. So what Kat has instilled and developed is peers that have these truth teller roles where they can develop their own skills in the process, but allows players to really talk to each other and essentially become an extension of the coaching team, which then relays back to the coaches and has this information which then creates this unity which is so important in Kate's philosophy which she really instills there. And then we talked about internal happiness, the golden circle, looking at individuals and our own journeys and the players' own journeys that they're on. We then talked about talent ID and how personality may come into play and how this may be identified, along with technical and tactical ability along the way as well. We talked about different personality assessments such as the DISC assessment, Myers-Briggs, personality traits, and how players must trust the process. She then talked about anchors and students in terms of what they must maintain and look at, and there's so much more into that which I'm not going to give away, but you can really listen to this and all these fantastic concepts. But it's really about collaboration and instilling this development opportunity into all these players. I really appreciate Kate's time for coming on, and it was great to speak to her, and I hope you take as much away from this episode as I have. You can follow, drop a subscribe, drop a like for the Reflective Coach podcast on YouTube, Spotify and Anchor, as well as Twitter and LinkedIn. It is TRC Podcast _ on Twitter. It is the Reflective Coach Podcast everywhere else. This is Coach Luca. Please enjoy this episode, the Reflective Coach Podcast.
So other than that, our whole house got sick right after Christmas, but can't complain.
That just seems to be the way that everyone is at the minute, just like loads of sickness going around, and it's just no matter who you speak to or where, it just seems to be there.
Yep, and it's like unavoidable. For a holiday, you're with a bunch of people that you haven't spent time with, and someone's going to get sick. So
yeah, that's where it's sort of coming from and stemming from, really.
Yeah.
But how's the start of 2023 gone for you so far then?
Good. Kind of slow. I mean, we're gearing up. All our student athletes come on campus next week, and so it'll really rev up next week. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing for me. Sort of like this is sort of like that quiet week before everything gets back into normality and routine, and then suddenly you're back late nights and traveling and everything else going on.
Yep, I travel this weekend, and then next week's our big convention, and it's gonna get busy really fast.
Because I spoke to quite a few different American coaches and those who are out in the States, for example, and obviously a lot of players are looking for this showcase and events and putting themselves out there. And it just seems so fascinating that you have sort of events and showcases like this, and something which is so big, and when you see it, especially through Twitter and social media, it's so cool to look at from the outside, and something that I wish we had here. But it must be so exciting sort of to gear up for those and sort of experience it.
It is. I think it's getting a little out of hand on like the social media side of it. I don't know how much you've noticed, but like every college is saying that they're going there, post your schedule. So there's a little bit of added pressure to the student athlete, and like posting schedules and this and that, and really highlighting themselves on social media. However, what a great platform to do it. So Um, it's the showcases are really great, and I think um, I don't know, we're pretty fortunate that we have these showcases that we get to go watch so many players. And for the most part, every showcase, the players are from all over the country. So you don't have to, fly to California to see Californians. They're going to be at whatever showcase you end up at. So um, that's kind of nice, is that they bring them all together. Um, it's a lot of, you're chasing a lot of games. You're working hard on those showcases, but it's fun.
I can imagine because obviously when you see a lot of players, a lot of games, there's a lot of assessment to take place, and it obviously can be so difficult, sort of for both the player and then the coach on the flip side. So, it can be an amazing event, but also you can bring its difficulties with it. For example.
Oh yeah. I always have a hard time remember, like, I take notes and do all of that, and sometimes it really doesn't matter what notes I take. I have the hardest time remembering that particular player because you watch so many players in a day. In one day you're watching 12 plus games, and half of each game, and it's trying to keep it all up, like, organized in your brain and on paper. It's challenging.
And in terms of that sense, then obviously, if you were to sort of break down the US soccer program, also you have these showcase events, and obviously players are trying to gear up and get out there for colleges. So is it to look for then scholarship at college then for 16, 17, 18? How does it sort of work?
In terms of, like, who we're looking for.
Well, if sort of a player starting on their journey, and so if they're at 12 and they say, I want to achieve this by 18, sort of what would they do? Go to high school, then try and gain a scholarship, and then college football, is it then? Or
Yeah, so I mean, it's this pay to play model here, right? So they join a club, a soccer club. For the most part, a majority of collegiate soccer, women soccer players. This is on the women's side. The men's side's a little bit different, but um, a majority of women's college soccer players played in a club, for a club at during their youth career. And while they're in that club setting, they go to a bunch of showcases, and that's where they're identified. I don't think very many college soccer players only played high school soccer. Actually, fewer and fewer of them are playing in high school anymore. They really focus on club as much as they can. Um, Very few are being recruited solely out of high school soccer. So it is unfortunate that it's this pay to play model, and you have to pay to play in these clubs, and that's the tough part. Is it it's a bit of a systemic issue, but you they haven't fixed it yet. So, but yeah, that's kind of how it goes. Is mostly through the club route.
because that's interesting. It's sort of good to sort of hear what happens in the US and how different it is. Because I think obviously here in Britain we can take so much away because the athlete program in America is so cool, and like there's so much out there. I was talking to someone yesterday and he was saying how many different facilities there are. You could just start a program because there's so much out there. And when you look at the sports of America, you don't just have soccer. You got baseball, then you got NHL, the basketball, and then a bit, boxing, for example, is quite a wide range of it. Whereas here in the UK, obviously you have all that, but that's a lot less scale compared to how big football is here. And it's sort of like, right, football, maybe rugby in Wales, but in America, there's so many different sport routes you could go down,
Yeah,
for example.
yeah. It's kind of sad. So when I was growing up, which was a long time ago, we got to play multiple sports. Because soccer wasn't year round yet. Most sports weren't year round yet. So you would play, for me, I would play soccer in the fall. They had indoor soccer in the winter, but I went and played basketball. I skied, did that stuff in the winter time. And then you went back to soccer, and I played high school soccer in the spring, and then I played all the sports in the summer. I played softball, I played soccer, all of it. So you got to play a lot of sports. Now, a lot of these youth players are specializing at a really young age. So they're only one sport athletes, but it's really fun to find the multi sport athletes that get to play multiple sports because they're usually the most athletic. And they have some sort of intangible skills that one sport athletes don't have. I always use the example of, like, basketball players. Oftentimes, ones that are good at rebounding, they're usually really good at figuring out where that ball's going to bounce in the box. Like they're usually pretty good at winning the first and second balls in the air, like that kind of thing. So, reading the flight of the ball alone. So it is interesting because as much as like we love that we're specializing in a sport, it is really beneficial to be a multi-sport athlete.
Of course, and that's where that sort of difficulty comes into when you have players sort of trying to put everything into one pot. Like I want to go into soccer, so I'm going to commit as much time into it. I'm going to try and go out to various clubs, one-to-one coaching, and it takes away from when they have that multi opportunity where they could go and experience sports, and then football or soccer doesn't work out, and then they're like, well, what's next really, because they
Right.
haven't experienced other sports, or they don't have the skill set, or they're at that older age where they have to go and develop all those skills where
Exactly.
these players are there, and it's so difficult for a player to sort of judge at a young age, and that's obviously where the magic of a coach comes in at times. But it's sport in itself is just such a difficult industry and pathway to be on, and it's one that you've got to give your all to. But you have to have such an open mindset to make sure you have all the opportunities available to yourself when you get to 16, 17, and so on.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We it's funny you say that the American model and everything is so cool. We have a player coming to us from Liverpool, and I think the model over in England and being able to be in those academies is so cool. Like that's something that we don't have very much on the women's side at all here. On the men's side, they work through like the MLS, but on the women's side, not so much. We're not affiliated with pro teams or anything like that. So the academy piece of it is just so it's just neat to watch players go up through the academies there.
And that sort of interlinks with the conversation that I was having yesterday. Obviously, America is so big, so many states, so many different diversities. Population is quite, large, and it can be quite diverse in different states and areas that you go through. So, obviously, the program in the US can be slightly different, and it's still a growing program. There's so much that can still happen because of the size of America. So, there's more
Mhm.
professional sports clubs growing. The MLS might change. Obviously, the women's game is growing and getting bigger, especially after the success of the last decade of the
Yeah.
women's team. So, America has this amazing program, but it is nowhere near, as you say, at a point where it could be. And it's fascinating to watch from the outside to see how big that could grow and certainly
Oh
get
yeah.
there. Because, we do have this amazing academy system, but if we took your high school system and grew it, I think sport
Right.
here could be even bigger, for example. And, we could be turning over athletes to a higher standard or creating more athletes. And then it's about that national success, for example.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. I think they've tried to do some like residency programs for sort of the youth national teams, especially on the men's side here. And if they did more of that sort of academy where they were in school and they were training, and it would be so cool. But you would be taking away from a lot of these kids high school experiences, which is what they really value here. So it's hard. Like you can't really find the right balance. I think it heads in the right direction and then it goes backwards. It heads in the right direction and goes backwards. I think we're in an okay place right now.
Oh, of course, and I think it's a great place to be in, and it's so interesting, to see where it goes over the next few years and how it continues, and it's certainly interesting to see the difference between male and female. So, for example, the females, there's so many females coming through right now, but they're having this amazing opportunity. And when I spoke to a lot of them, and I look at their like records from high school, and there's like achievement, and then they got GDPAs, and they got all this amazing honors, and then they go abroad because they're trying to find it. I'm like, well, it sort of defeats the object of your system in a way, because you sort of get to a point and then there's nothing for you and you have to
Right.
go abroad. And I just feel so sorry and heartfelt for them. Okay, it's amazing going out abroad, but then they gotta leave their families and make that tough decision as a young person, and then have to go abroad, juggle up, going into different environments, clubs, language barriers, meeting so many new people, moving, living, and there's so much into it. And then they're jumping around different countries for years to try and make sure that's sustainable or try and land something permanent. And it's great that they can have it as a young person, but then it's also sad that it has to be taken away from their amazing program that they have been on, for example.
Right. Right. Yeah, there's really only one way to go here professionally, and that's the NWSL. And it's just too small right now for everyone to go or to go and be successful. I mean, a lot of players could go, but they just end up being, like there for a very short amount of time. So you're right, they have to go overseas, and that's not easy at all. I mean, they're usually going like third division and, living very minimally, um, and it's not very sustainable. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if sort of that second division is really going to develop here. It'd be great if it did. It sort of exists, but it's such a short season. It's only 3 months long. But if they actually made it so that there was more opportunity, that'd be great.
Of course, and let's hope that it continues to grow. And where you have so many females going abroad and trying to locate those opportunities, here you sort of look at young players who don't get in through the academy system here in Wales and England, for example, and then they try to look to America for scholarships to try and get out there. So it's interesting to see those who leave America and then those who come into America on the male side. It's this continuous you know line of production which sort of
Yep.
swivels off in so many different directions, and it's a real interesting concept to sort of look at from the outside, and then when you're on the inside and gain these insights when you speak to individuals and coaches like yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I always find it interesting because there's on the female side, there's so many, youth players in England, if you will, and a lot of them come over here to play and get an education. Um, but they're not that educated on what our system is like over here, the collegiate system is like over here. So they end up at like kind of average schools, a lot of them do, but they're better than average. There's a big disconnect there, and in the education of where they can play and should play, um, and then they want to go play pro so they can go back home, or they try to stay here. It's very interesting. It is sort of this like circular, cyclical thing.
Yeah, because I got two friends, one who went out to America and one who went out to Canada. And the one who went out to Canada tried to get a scholarship, had one out there, and then he came back and then went, do you know what? I'm not chasing this dream anymore. I've done enough now. I sort of play football for the fun and I just join a club team here. Whereas the other one just came back sort of a year ago from America, and he's gone straight into a male environment here at seniors level. So, you could be playing with, adults 30, 40, 50, various ages. But he's coming from America, and even though he's an adult now, he's only ever been used to youth soccer. So when
Yeah.
in the first few months he was at his new club, he literally snapped, and that's because they were used to playing the seniors way, and he's like, I've never experienced what
Yeah.
these sort of rules are, the way that you have things in the changing room, and it was quite difficult for him to adapt coming back from it. So it was quite interesting to see that from a psychological aspect.
That is interesting. Huh. Yeah. It's the environments are all very different, men's, women's, overseas, here. Um, it's all very different.
And in terms of that, then, when you have a typical week, so how does a typical week look for you then? Does it change week to week, or
With our team,
yeah,
yeah, so in the fall is our college competitive season. So that is crazy. That's a crazy 3 months. We are required to give them one day off. So they take Monday off. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we train. For us, we train in the middle of the day. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, we lift right after training. We'll do a little film. Thursdays, we do a scouting report right before training. And then Friday, we have a game. And then Saturday, we do a little recovery session. And then Sunday, we have a game. So that repeats for the whole season. And I love it. It's so much fun, but it's a grind. And physically, it's a grind. Like, I mean, you can only imagine 2 games in one weekend. Some of our players that play a lot of minutes are, racking up 8 miles in a game, if, or so. So 16 miles in a weekend, which is, do it in kilometers. It's a lot of kilometers. But yeah, it's really hard on the body. So that's our fall. And national championship is like the first weekend in December. And then we go into January, and starting in January, we have this, like, we call it our 8-hour weeks, and we're allowed 8 hours with our student athletes. 4 of those hours can be on a soccer ball. 4 of them can be like strength and conditioning. So we have that sort of set schedule. We're usually with them like 5 days a week, for roughly 2 months, not even that, like 6 weeks. And then after that, we go into our 15 or 20-hour weeks where we actually train normal 5 days a week, and then we have a game on the weekends, and we're allowed five competition days. They don't count for anything; they're just friendlies. Um, and then it ends when school ends. So it's all pretty condensed, and the NCAA really tries to push student athlete health and well-being, welfare, sort of like balance. So that's why that 8-hour weeks segment exists, so that we're not like grinding every single day all year. And then summertime, they go away and they do their own thing. So some of them will go play, some of them will go get an internship, some of them will stay here and work with our strength coach. We're not allowed to work with them, but they can work with our strength coach, and work our camps and stuff like that. So um, it's the competitive season is crazy. If you make it to the national championship, you play 26 games in um, 3 months, about 3.5 months.
Oh wow, that's pretty incredible to be fair.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a lot of games in a really really short amount of time.
And even if you take that short amount of time and then you look at, how long the academic year is, or even then a year for, a young player, how much else is crammed in there in terms of their studies, their life, and everything else that goes on. And then you look at a really pressurized 3 months because of the amount of games and everything that's going on. For a young person to go through it, that's quite a tough sort of
Oh
year for
yeah.
them.
Oh yeah, we always say the freshmen when they come in August, they're jumping on a moving train because they have no idea what they're getting themselves into soccer wise or school wise. So they have to start their soccer season and their first year in college all at the same time, and it's a wild ride. Like it's trying to manage their time and all of that. They actually, most of them do better in school in the fall when we're in our competitive season than they do in the wintertime, because they have so little time to focus on academics that they're actually really good at prioritizing. And then in the winter time, when they have way more time, free time, they're not as good at prioritizing. So they push things off. So they actually do much better academically in the fall when we're just go, go, go. And they're on the bus for a few hours, or stuck in a hotel for a few hours. They're able to focus on their academics a little bit more.
And that importance of routine, plays its benefits, and it develops those skill sets even for when they're away
Oh, yeah.
from soccer and sports in general. But for them to maintain that focus and to really be on it, and then they can sort of switch off. It's
Oh,
hard
yeah.
because they need that switch off time, but then you don't want them to switch off too much because then they forget that they got deadlines and other things going on.
Right. Right. It's a balance or a blend, if you will. It's tough. I mean, I was a college athlete. I think it's gotten much harder as years go on because the demand is so much higher academically these days, and the expectations are so much higher athletically these days. So I think it's gotten harder, but it's a grind. It's 4 years of just go go go. But I always say, I still say it. It was a long time ago. It was 4 of the best years of my life, was the college years.
And in terms of that, then, when you say obviously those expectations, especially when it's got harder, when it comes to sort of picking a player, or you have these applications or however it works, do they have to meet a certain criteria in terms of academic to get in, and then they have a really important academic qualification to go through? How does that sort of look and work?
Yeah, so every school will be a little bit different in terms of what their academic standards are to get in. For us at Grand Valley, the standards are relatively high. So they have to meet those academic standards. And then once they get into school, they have to maintain certain GPAs to, one, stay eligible, to two, just be able to continue to practice. So yeah, there's quite a demand while they're in school to maintain that GPA, just to stay eligible. So like if they don't stay eligible, they won't get to compete in the fall season. So if they did poorly in this winter semester, they wouldn't necessarily be able to train in the or play in the fall semester.
And that's a really interesting concept. Obviously, we have similar here where you might have schools which look at that, or colleges. If you were going to choose to go down that route, away from a scholarship in terms of an academy or university level, but then in terms of what we have here in the UK is sort of, you might not do so well at the age of 16 at your GCSE levels, but it doesn't really matter because it's all about your performance. And if you're good enough for a scholarship, then sort of what the academies do is just make sure that the standard qualifications are met and they get their teaching time, and then it's just about performance. And then, if they don't make it after 2 years, then it's on them, sort of thing. But
Yeah.
it's really interesting to see. It's sort of like, right, we want to take you on. Doesn't really matter about the qualifications. We'll put your teaching up, and then it's working out for yourself from there unless you make it professional. And other clubs looking at players are then not really bothered about the qualifications of the players as such, because it's about performance and looking at that player. And it's difficult then because those players are like at the age of 15, 16, they're like, right, I'm getting a scholarship at the end of this year. I've been told I am. Do I have to worry about my GCSEs as much? You might get the ones who go, yeah, absolutely, and the ones who go, nah, do you know what? I'm close to being a professional footballer,
Yeah.
and then they sort of give it up and like, I don't have to study anymore, and it's a difficult one to get through.
It is difficult. And on the men's side, if they're going to become a professional footballer, they're going to make a lot of money. Like it's kind of like American football here. A lot of them are like, I'm going to go into the NFL. Like, I don't need to focus on much because they're going to make a ton of money. Whereas, like, for the women's side, they have to do well in academics because there's not money in soccer for us to play professionally. So, like, you'll find very rarely a female will be like, I don't need to worry about my academics because I'm going pro. Um, and most of the ones that have gone pro early, they still work to get their degree because they're not going to make enough money to just survive because there's not much money in women's athletics at all.
And it's good that you say that, because so many of the women that I've spoken to, they're so well educated and they have such amazing degrees and qualifications, and they're like, oh, do you know what? If soccer didn't work out, then I'll just go and be like a lawyer or just go and be a doctor. I'm like,
Yeah,
that's so
doctor.
cool.
Yeah, doctor. It's. I mean, on my team alone, I think half of them are like nursing majors, pre med majors. Yeah, they're all going to go on and do great things. And there's a couple that are aspiring professional athletes, and they still are getting great degrees, and they have something great to fall back on. So
Absolutely, and it is great that they sort of have these options to fall back on, and they have so many different career pathways, which could then end up giving them a good life because of it and earn that good money. But when you sort of look at footballers here in the UK, if they make it a League Two level, which is one of the lower leagues, and although they're professional, they could still be earning 700, 800, 900 pound a week, which isn't too bad for a professional footballer. But then what a lot of them are finding, if they come out of football age 28, 29, 30, or they've had injury, they haven't got those qualifications or anything to fall back on. Then they're like, oh no, what do I do here?
right, right. Yeah, that would be the scary thing for me is what do you fall back on? And I'm sure a lot of them get into coaching or something like that. But huh, yeah, you got to get your degree.
100%, I completely agree. And obviously, when you're in your capacity and you're looking at so many different players and you're working with college program, and you have so much to sort of balance and make sure that they're going through this and all the program that you say. But when we come back down to it and we take away all of that and it's just on the grass and we're with the players, what are the things that you enjoy the most when you're out there with them?
Camaraderie and I would say camaraderie and like togetherness. So the way I coach is sort of, guided discovery through a lot of conversation, and it's not really strict, like X's and O's. You have to go here, you have to go there. It's collaborative. So I think having those conversations and being able to be collaborative and um, all of that on the field is by far one of my favorite things about being on the field. Um, with student athletes or with anyone for that matter, and with my staff, my coaching staff, our collaboration is fantastic. So I think that's one of my favorite things is knowing that we can do it all together. And I'm not perfect. I don't know everything, and I don't see exactly what our athletes see. So being able to sort of collaborate and work through things is one of my favorite things.
And in that collaboration is really important, and it's great to have that togetherness and that camaraderie, and it can really help bring together a team, and especially when you have so many different individuals with those personality types, and when you're taking them into this college program, and they all have their own different goals, their own achievements, their own sort of backgrounds. Is that must be really important at that level to sort of instill it and really integrate at an early stage.
It is. I think one of the biggest challenges in the college game is almost every player that we have, that most schools have, was at one point the best player on their club team. So we've got every player that was at one point a best player. And now they're just kind of like an average player. So trying to make sure that these now average players feel like they're part of a whole, and like working together to accomplish something is really important. And I think in the women's game, that's huge for us, is the togetherness and collaboration. um, so I really enjoy just being on the field, watching film, because of the conversation that gets to come about from it.
And when you sort of take all these best players from their club and then they're coming in together and they're turning into average players, for some of those players they might really struggle with that, because they're like, I was the best, and then they're seeing players that are better than them or more competitive, or then it becomes a difficult one to sort of manage and maintain, because there's a lot of competition internally amongst it, and then psychology changes, and then motivations of players are up and down, and then relationships form, and so then it's really important for you to identify, but then to try and create that and take that sort of edge away at times, and then sort of go, right, we need this on game day, but we don't need it every training session,
Right.
because it can be difficult sort of to maintain, especially when you're at that level.
Oh, it's hard. Relationships are so important so that you can get to kind of understand where their psyche is on a daily basis, and if they're struggling or if not. But I think the biggest thing is really sort of hitting home, like trusting the process and knowing that as a freshman you're probably not going to be the best, but if you, one, trust the process and take charge of your, I guess, take ownership in your development, um, you'll head on the right in the right direction and hopefully be one of the best on the team in the years to come. But trusting the process is the first thing they need to do, because if they don't, they usually go backwards and they end up not improving at all.
And when it comes down to that, they're obviously in that process and they're trying to follow a program, and they all have their individual goals, and then they'll get to a point where they all go off and do their own individual things, and life takes over. Then they might continue in soccer, some might not, some might get jobs and so on. But then you'll find in a few years' time that togetherness is still connected to them, even though they've gone off and done those different things.
Oh yeah, I would say the friendships that are formed um, in the collegiate team environment are so special. And um, no matter like how good a player is and how not so good a player is, like it doesn't matter, that friendship usually still exists. And I'm 20 plus years out of college, and my closest friends are my college teammates that we talk almost on a daily basis. So those friendships, um, they definitely last forever. And I would say in the women's game, um, they're all going to go away from college. They're going to remember some highlights from games. They're going to remember the national championships they won. But I think the things that stick out the most for them and that they'll remember the most are the memories they made with their teammates. Um, Sounds really cheesy, but it's very true. Like that, those are the memories that they're gonna remember forever, because soccer isn't forever for most of us, right? Like it's, for a lot of them it's a 4-year thing in college and then they're done. So but the memories they make with their friends is something that'll last forever.
Absolutely, and obviously here in the UK, when you get a player, when they sort of turn 11, they're 5 years away from a scholarship. Now that is a long time, but then it's a very quick period of time that can fly by. especially when they're in high school and so much is going on, they're growing up. So for a lot of them, they have this focus on what might be at the age of 15, 16 and looking for a scholarship. So they spend so much time playing academy football, development football, transitioning up and down, a lot of one-to-one coaching, development coaching, working then at other clubs if they go back to grassroots, etc. So then a lot of these memories and childhood moments are taken away from them because they're so focused on trying to get through this pathway and their end goal. When they get to 15, 16 and it might not work out for them and then are like, right, I have to look at other options, it's quite sad to look at because they don't have these memories and relationships and connections with young people their age because they were so disciplined or taken away from that because they were on this journey and it has taken away from their childhood moments. So I think memories is so important, and that's something that I've tried to really instill in my coaching philosophy because at the end of the day, when you could be retired and they're still living their lives and they've still got these friendships, it's all because of the work that you've done at this period of time, for example.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's it's hard. You don't want, especially a 15-year-old, to think of it as a job, right? But a lot of the youth players think of it as a job because they're playing in order to be able to play at the next level or get a scholarship or something like that. But when it becomes a job, the fun's taken out of it. And whether you have relationships with people that you're playing with or not, it's just not as fun because it's a job. So trying to make sure that they don't feel like it's a job, right? Something that they don't have to go to every day, but they want to go to. Kind of finding that internal happiness in soccer. Why am I on the field? It's because I love it and I love the people I play with, not because my end goal is scholarship. So we always kind of talk about like the golden circle and focusing on ourselves, and our internal happiness more so than the external piece of it all. So we focus on the internal side of things. We should find happiness and joy when we're on the field.
And when obviously that relates and interlinks with talent ID and these showcase events, obviously you are looking for really good technical players and the players who have that ability because that's part of the program and what you might be accountable for. But taken away from the technical side, when it comes down to that happiness and looking at personality traits, are they sort of the things that you look out for as well? Or what sort of other things do you then look for?
Absolutely. We get most of our recruits onto campus, so we are able to interact with them in person. We're able to interact with them on the phone. Not every single student athlete is going to be super outgoing, personable, or comfortable talking to adults. So we make sure that we have good conversations with them, but we also put them in front of what we call our truth tellers. Our truth tellers are our players. Because I can tell you as much as I want about our program, but our players are the ones that are going to really tell you what it's like to be a student athlete at our school. So we make sure to put them in front of them, but at the same time, our current student athletes get to know them and sort of can say like, yeah, they would really fit into our culture. They've got sort of a we mentality. They're enthusiastic. They're really friendly. So our team kind of knows what our values are, and can kind of figure out if a recruit would align with those values.
And that's a really interesting concept, and that's something that I'm just noting down is that truth tellers is really, an important aspect to have because when you look at young people in that relationship and those relationships are important, taking in consideration that they might struggle to, relay what their thoughts, feelings are and everything that they're going through to an adult, it can be quite difficult for a young person, especially when they're having these honest conversations and sometimes they might take feedback the wrong way and like, oh, well, this coach said this to me. And it's like, well, no, this coach has said this, but not in the context that you're relaying it. So when it comes to creating those groups and those opportunities to speak to young people their age so it can be relayed, it's sort of an extension to the coaching staff in terms of then developing skills in those young people. So that's a really interesting concept to take on board.
Oh yeah. I love getting them in front of our truth tellers. On our team, we have, on every team at our institution, we have what we call anchors, and anchors are student athletes who have gone through specific training. They've gone through mental health training. They've gone through sort of like a counseling type training And our team knows that they can go to those particular people if they don't feel comfortable going to an adult about big issues. So that is also like internally something that's really special to us, is that we have these in our group that are the same as our student athletes, that are able to relate to someone that might be having an issue and they don't feel comfortable going to an adult. So that's pretty cool, because not everyone's comfortable going to an adult, and that's okay.
And that's the important thing, is about identifying what may be affecting that happiness in a player, because as coaches we have such high commitment and expectations and performance levels, and we want players to maintain this and be the best at every contact. But obviously so much goes on throughout their day, relationships amongst each other, relationships with families, everything going on in the background, studies. They may be affected by the game before training session, then they're not at that optimal performance level that we expect each and every training session. And then sometimes some coaches are disciplining them for that, or they're having a go at them because they haven't achieved these optimal levels. But then sometimes just taking that 2 minutes just to talk to a player, or just sitting back and watching them and seeing what might be affecting them, can really help get through to what may be affecting them inside or psychologically, in terms of why they may not be performing and what will be affecting them. Because sometimes we are too quick to judge and go against what the performance levels that we expect. They're not at that level, and sometimes there's a lot more to that than just on the grass.
Right, right. Exactly.
And do you find it an importance then to work a part of your team? So then you might have, say, 20 players, but there might be 3 or 4 coaches. Connecting the coaches with the right personalities to the groups of players, then is that something you find beneficial and works for you?
Yeah, we do a lot of coffee dates, if you will. So we'll go and just get coffee with our players, and you definitely I identify with a group of players that maybe one of my assistants just isn't as much. So we kind of find our people, or find their people. You're just automatically attracted to people that are like you. Um, so we sort of, it just kind of happens naturally. But at the same time, um, we we do a lot of work on sort of what our personality traits are and what our behaviors are. So have you ever heard of the DISC assessment?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay. So that's sort of like a personality behavior type um, assessment. And so that also helps us sort of identify um, who we are more like, and who we may get along with a little bit better. So that helps in terms of who and how we can communicate to people. So there's just some student athletes that don't take certain communication. You know, they may hear me and think I'm a total jerk, but my assistant says the same exact thing in the same tone, and they take it differently. So we just know, like, there's just certain ways that to communicate with people, and some people are going to hear it, some people aren't. So we kind of do a lot of work on that, on the behavioral and personality side of it.
And it's really interesting concepts when we do talk about personalities, and how that tone might be taken by one coach and the player can react to it fine, but then the other coach, they might think that you are a jerk in that example. And when I took over as head of coaching at one club, something that I wanted to really change was how we look at recruiting our coaches and how we sort of develop them. And I started to create a personality trait test against what we would expect in terms of our club philosophy and what we wanted to instill, because it was really important to have coaches that that maintain the identity and fit in part of that in terms of bringing across that philosophy, because it was all about that togetherness, that one identity in terms of evolving players, and we want to be a group, we want to not leave anyone behind, we're doing it all together as one. So it really stemmed from the Myers-Briggs assessments, for example.
Yeah.
And that was really good to understand personality types and sort of what coaches could bring and whether they were going to work part of a team. Because if they couldn't work part of a coaching team, then how were they ever going to stem in terms of what we wanted to achieve and in terms of our identity? So what we see a lot of here is coaches with their own ego, their own personality, who might develop a team but then take that team away from a club and then go to another club so they can have full control. But we didn't want that, and we don't want to lose any coaches. So what we tried to instill was this way of supporting coaches, but making sure we had the right coaches that would maintain the club and put the club first. So it's a little bit different to what you may be doing in that sense, but it was really important for us to have that maintenance and develop that personality to really create a good coaching force as well as that
Yeah.
identity.
What are you on Myers Briggs? Do you remember?
I'm more towards introvert.
Okay, so you're an
Um,
I.
yeah, had something else as well. Yeah, but I can remember doing it. I thought, do you know what? This is such an interesting concept.
Is awesome. I'm an ENFJ, I think, or ENF something. Yeah, I can't. My last letter has changed. I've done it a couple times in the last like 5 years, and as I've become more like into sort of a head coaching role, my the last letter has changed somehow. But yeah, I'm more on the extroverted side.
And it's interesting because that those sort of personality traits can change as we grow and evolve, and it can sort of be a great addition to have. But then sometimes we sort of reflect on things and like, do you know what? I'm not happy with that, and it can certainly change, especially when our role changes. So, for example, going from an assistant coach into a head coach or a lead coach, do you find do you enjoy that change in yourself? Then do you really take it on board?
So I was an assistant coach for a really long time, but I'm a goalkeeper, so I'm just kind of like naturally a dominant person. Um, and I really enjoyed the assistant coach role because I really liked the relationship side of it with players. Head coaches, the relationships are just different. Um, but once I got into a head coaching role, I knew my dominance would come out a little bit more than it had as an assistant, and it did. But I also knew that I wanted to make sure that I continued to focus on relationships like I did as an assistant coach. So I was able to sort of like during games, I am very like vocal and dominant, absolutely. But I was able to scale that back in like a training session and that kind of thing, and continue with, like I said, the camaraderie and the collaborativeness. So I've seen the change from assistant coach to head coach, more on a personal level than like outwardly, if you will. So I'm like way more detail oriented as a head coach, way more detail oriented as a head coach, way more process oriented as a head coach, particular. So I've seen those things sort of come out once I became a head coach versus when I was an assistant.
And they are interesting concepts, and some people might see us in a different light when we do change those roles and we have to go into leadership and we have to make those decisive decisions and at times very tough decisions. And I know when I was at a club and I transitioned into head of coaching and then I was chairman, a lot of the parents and groups that I had at a level when I was just a team manager was very different to when I became chairman. They were like, well, why are your decisions changing? Why is your outlook? I said, because I have to look after the club. I'm
Right.
looking after every individual. I'm looking after all the
Right.
parents, the coaching staff, the kids, our identity, philosophy, and all the strategy and everything else that goes with it as chairman, compared to just looking at the team and just coaching them and managing
Right.
them. And it took so much away, and it was quite difficult sort of then to balance that and go, I'm missing that sort of side of things because I have to prioritise this. And it became a real difficult balance then when I sort of stepped into a different role and different light.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it is. I mean, I cared about the team just as much as an assistant coach as I do as a head coach. It's just different because your big picture is it's much more of like a macro scale than a micro scale. So um, it is very different, but I'm equally as passionate about it all.
And it's great because sometimes you might find you're on this journey, and when you start off on your journey, you're like, right, this is my end goal. I want to be at the top. I want to be a head coach, or I want to be head of coaching or chairman, and so on. But then along the way, when you get towards those levels and you might achieve it, you go, do you know what? This actually isn't for me. I'm happy to go back down and just be a coach and get back on the grass and connect with the players. So it is great that you find that happiness in terms of being that head coach role, because being a head coach really isn't an easy job. But then to sort of continue to enjoy it and really get what you want out of it, because obviously there's so many expectations, we're accountable for so much, but we want to make sure we get what we need and want out of it at the same time as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I became a coaching director here for a club many years ago. And I had to direct a club, but I was still coaching. But I found that I wasn't able to put as much into my coaching as I wanted to because I was so focused on the director stuff. That was hard. Like, because if I'm going to do something, I want to do it well. And I wasn't planning my sessions well. I wasn't organized enough with my teams because I was so focused on the director side. So I ended up going into college coaching full time after that. But I was at a point where I was like, I have to pick one or the other. Like, am I gonna run this club and just do a little bit of coaching, or am I gonna do all coaching? And that was a big, like, a pivotal moment for me. Was like I belong on the field, and I knew I belonged on the field. As much as I like leading and being a director, I really wanted to be on the field.
And it's great that you still have that on the field stuff, and it might come down to sometimes you may have to make that choice, and it's a really difficult one where you can overthink it so much in your mind. You're like, right, I'm more going this way, and then suddenly a day changes, you're going back this way, and it's not a great position to be in when you sort of have that choice to make. And it's
Right.
I know I've been there myself, and it was just the worst weekend of my life.
Oh yeah, it's tough, and spent you just you're chasing things. You feel guilty, and yeah, it's nuts.
So in that sense, when you are a full-time college coach, then do you have to be like a qualified teacher or meet the teaching standards, or is it just coach and then they do their stuff in college then?
Yeah, I think at the Division 3 level, some of them teach classes, but they don't have to be teachers. Um, yeah, it's not a requirement to be an educator. I think for the most part, every school requires you to have some sort of coaching license. But other than that, you don't have to be qualified to be an educator. So we all have different degrees and all sorts of things. My degree was in biology and Spanish. So
And that's interesting concepts, and it's great that you can connect with Spanish players or those who come in and can speak that. But
yeah, my assistant is actually Spanish and he speaks Spanish. I just pretend still.
just nodding, yeah, yeah, yeah. But do you find there's a lot of then jobs then out in America as a result of that, or is it quite diverse in terms of the jobs that are available?
College jobs?
Just in general. So if you were just said, right, do you know what, next week I want to move anywhere in America for any job full time, but it has to be coaching. Would you say there's a lot of jobs for individuals then?
Yeah, but the money piece probably is the challenge.
Mm.
Like, I could probably go to California and be a club coach because there's so many kids that play soccer in California that they need coaches, but the pay won't allow me to live there. So I think I could probably go work anywhere, and there are jobs, but the pay wouldn't be there. So I think there's a lot of college jobs available, but they're like for second assistant jobs at, smaller schools that don't pay well. So um yeah, for those that are trying to get their foot in the door and that kind of thing, I think there's jobs. But if you're trying to live, you know, well, the money is not really there.
And that's again a difficult concept to sort of weigh up in terms of that career aspiration, that journey which we're on, because then the life comes into it, and then we have to weigh up what might be that value. Whereas in here in the UK, we have great jobs which are full time, but then it sort of then comes down to who you know, and then this ex players getting a lot of jobs, and it becomes quite difficult to get jobs. Whereas sort of in America, because how big it is, and obviously colleges and then clubs, and there must be, from an outside look, a lot of jobs available to be able to sort of jump around if you hadn't had career commitment, life commitments, house, and all that sort of stuff that goes with it.
Yeah, I think you could. I think there are quite a few jobs. Like I have a family. I couldn't bounce around, but I did before I had a family. I was all over the place. So there a lot of the college coaches were pretty transient. We move all over the place just to get to where we want to go. From assistant, you might go second assistant to a first assistant job at a smaller school to a bigger assistant job at a bigger school, eventually making your way to a head coaching job. So yeah, you kind of have to bounce around to get there.
And obviously because of that, a lot of coaches that I spoke to say you might go to one state, they might do soccer a bit differently. Go to another, it might be different here. But then when it comes back down to the coach and say yourself, when we look at tactical styles of playing, the way that you sort of shape and set up a team, is there a particular way that you set up a team in terms of how you would traditionally set up, no matter where you went?
Oh, in terms of setup, I think it's like the playing philosophy. Like we'll be very, no matter where I went, I would try to be very possession oriented. Um, always looking to break lines of pressure and creating goal scoring opportunities. However, creating a very adaptable team to where if team we're playing against plays a high line, we can go over them. That's like the biggest challenge here is creating that adaptable team because what set if you say one thing the team's just going to stick to that one thing, so it's tough. um, I would say there are areas of the country that can go a lot more direct because of their athleticism, and they do that down south in certain conferences. They play a lot more direct style soccer. But for me, I would probably always play this possession style of soccer.
And what formation would you choose to implement that? Would you say?
I'm a big fan of the 4-3-3, but also the 3-5-2. So it would just depend on the personnel. This last season, we flexed in and out of the 4-3-3 and the 3-5-2 a ton because we had the personnel to do so, and kind of you know works with the style of play that we like to play.
And it's that importance for adaptation, and having those two different formations is great because then they learn to play in different systems and the expectations. So, for example, I've gone into an under 19s group this year and I'm playing a player from left wing to left back. I'm like, you're providing that attacking input from the left back side that we're not having originally because the original left back is quite limited. So what you're offering is quite good down that left side, and then we're having that pace with the player now in front of you. So we're having success. But then he's like, bro, I'm not a left back. I've never played here before. And I'm like, but that's part of your growth and development, which I'm now trying to develop in you.
Right.
So it's great to have those different systems, and you can see players which then become fixated or limited to certain positions because they've only ever played in certain systems continuously.
Right. Right. We have a lot of wide players, attacking wide players, and we converted several of them to outside backs this year, and they weren't happy about it. But because of the style of play that we play, our outside backs are actually usually on the ball and attacking more so than our wide forwards are. So they got used to it. The hard part for them was really understanding the defensive concepts and responsibilities of a back. But I'm all about having them adapt and learn different roles because sometimes we need it. And quite frankly, just because their youth coach put them in that position doesn't mean that that's their best position.
Of course, completely agree, and it fits in nicely with that guided discovery learning, which is so important and complements players finding their own way. But if say I don't know the chairman or the head of coaching whatever said right, here's a brand new team, you got 6 months with them, and you're starting with them in 2 weeks' time, but you knew that you were going to implement your possession philosophy in a way that you wanted to play, what would be the first thing that you'll go about doing and implementing your style?
Seriously, defending. That would be the first thing I would do. And because I think that defending is one of the most important things. So we would work on defending. We'd work on defending in our shape that we want to work on, that we want to play in, and then we would progress into attacking. And it's all principle based, right? Like, so we would talk about the principles and what we are looking for. But the very first thing I would do, I would spend the first probably 3 sessions on defending, individual defending, small group defending, and team defending. The better you defend, the more time you get on the ball and the more opportunities you get to go to goal.
And it is great that you sort of say about these principles and building on it, because sometimes coaches may have a system and style that they want to play, but then they won't build on their principles in terms of how they want to do it. So it's about those building blocks and instilling these values and these principles which we expect in these players. Then if you can do it in a shape and then build around it, the players will naturally find their own way, which is a key important concept. And when you find that you want to be possession based, for example, do you have to find then you tailor your program to be more possession based in terms of a lot of the exercises that you do and practice content? Or
Yeah, we most of our sessions have possession built into them. like I said, we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes because I would say a lot of female soccer players, at least right now at this level, if you tell them one way, they struggle to do it another way. So we'll just possess the ball to possess the ball, and it's painful. When we could probably get in behind with maybe a big ball. So we do a lot of possession. We try to do some stuff that helps them learn how to adapt and read what the opponent is giving us. I would say the times we really train going a little bit more direct is in a transition session. So if we want to work on transition, we'll work on sort of that long ball, getting in behind, that kind of thing. But yeah, most of our sessions involve possession.
And it's great that you don't want to limit players in that sense, and it's similar to the team that I've taken over. So we're very good attacking, very good going forward. We have a wide players, we've got quick pace, and it's great that we are attacking. But then we don't keep possession when we can keep possession. And what we're seeing, and we're just me and my assistant coach are standing there going, we haven't connected 5 passes yet, and we might be in 20 minutes into the game. So we're trying to really instill this possession-based football into the team, because we're losing too much possession, we're losing on the counter attack, then they're going and scoring, and then we don't know how to build and go forward, and a lot of our chances are scrappy, or when we do get that great opportunity to build 4 or 5 passes, then we get away, then we do score, but it's how we then consistently do that over long periods of the game. So then we're creating a lot of sessions and practice around possession based, and then the players are like, why are we just keeping the ball? It's like, because you don't keep it in a game day. So then we're not really seeing that transition at the moment. So at the start, we've only been doing it 4 months since we've taken over the team, but there's a lot of work for us to do where, even though we've only done it for 4 months, that we can keep building on it, because it's a 3-year project for us.
Yeah, and you said 3 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's you layer and you layer and you layer things, and eventually it all kind of comes together and works out. But it is tough when it doesn't translate from training into games. But the game has so much extra pressure, and it's there's adrenaline going and some individualism going, and so it's tough. But yeah, I feel you on not being able to connect 5 passes. That was our first couple games, was we really struggled with that. And then at the end it was like, okay, just go to goal. Just go to goal.
And it's great that you sort of say just have that, because then you're getting towards the strengths and what the players are doing naturally. Then it's like, right, now we can do this, and look at what we can do. And that's why it's important to have those films and look back and see what the players can improve, or go, do you know what, there's a pass there, or you could have opened up, because there are those external pressures, because a player might go, do you know what, I can beat this player, or I can see myself continuously doing it, and then they're doing it time and time. You're like, right, you beat him 4 times, but you realise time 5, 6 and 7 you've lost out to him. So you need to change it up now, like give and go, or switch your play, or break the line, for example. So it's great that players have that feedback and can sort of go, do you know what, there's more that I can do here, because over the years they might be coached by a youth coach, for example, where they've had them for so long, and the youth coach has gone, right, just beat them, because that's what you're good at. But then they become limited after a while, because that's all they've become good at.
Right. And then they match up in the future with someone that's just a good defender. I think that's always the tough part for us, is like, we've got some really good individual attacking players, but when they're matched up with a really good defender, it's really hard. Like, you're just not going to beat them, so don't try. Like, we'll just go around another way, and we'll get you the ball in behind. So there's other ways to get in behind.
Absolutely. And it's great that we've been able to cover this tactical concept and, start opening it up, and there's great scope to certainly go into it in the future. But I know we've been going for an hour now. I said we'd talk for an hour and how busy you are. But before you go, I just want to wrap up on some quick fire questions.
Yeah.
If you had to have someone or a player describe you in 3 words, what would they be?
Describe me in 3 words. Energetic, competitive, compassionate.
Fantastic. If you could move to any country to coach, where would it be and why?
Oh, man. Probably Australia.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because it's Australia, and because I think they've got some talent there that just is untapped.
Which is great. If you could spend a day with any coach or manager, who would it be and why?
Emma Hayes. she's a badass. Everything about her, she's awesome. I love the way she runs her team. I love her competitive spirit, but I also love her love for her players.
Fantastic. And who was or is your role model?
It changes all the time. I would say actually my role model right now is Jen Klein, who's my former boss at University of Michigan. One of my nearest and dearest friends, but she's taught me so much, and we were so collaborative. But she's by far one of my greatest role models.
Love that, love that. And now I know you said that you were an athlete and that you are now coaching, but if you were, say, a professional coach and you had the opportunity of, say, managing the national team or Chelsea or Man City or any club that you wanted to go to or Chelsea women's, would you be a full-time professional soccer player or a full-time professional coach at the highest level?
Oh, a player. I loved playing. I loved it. I love coaching. The competitiveness on both sides is what I love the most, but I loved playing. It was such a cool feeling. So yeah, player.
Fab. What is one top tip you give any coach right now?
Be relatable.
Fab. And what is one thing you enjoy most about coaching?
The let's see. What do I love most about coaching? The people.
That seems to be a common answer at the minute and one of the top ones. So, any interview tips, then any coach listening to this, put that in your interview.
People. Yep.
Yeah.
For sure. People.
But it's been fantastic to talk to you. It's been a great hour. I know that we have covered a lot of the US system and coaching jobs and stuff like that, but it's been great to sort of get their insight and sort of understand your sort of work and your role then to sort of then open up and understand the game and get that perspective. But, you know, the hour's flown by and I know that there's so much content and much more there to you, but I really appreciate you giving up this hour. I know how busy you are and how much more busier it's about to get, and I hope that the showcase goes well. But again,
Awesome.
I'm so thankful of your time for you coming on.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invite.
No worries, it's been a pleasure.
All right. See you later.
See you later. Thank